Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of the Livin The Dream podcast. My name is Rishi Barran. I have been with the Dan Patrick School of Sportscasting since near its beginning, but the person with me today has basically been with it since even before it started. His name is Clay Schrager, and he's working at ESPN. He is a content associate there. Clay, I know it's a little colder up there in Bristol today, but thanks for making time for us.
Yeah, not a problem, Rishi. Happy to do it.
Clay was part of our first graduating class and just a monumental event for our program when he walked. And Dan Patrick was there, and we had a little post celebration with Gary Jones, the president of Full Sail University. But I'm just so proud of Clay and all the progress that he's made to get to this point. Clay, let's rewind though. Where did this dream start for you?
The earliest I can remember wanting to work in sports, I was 5 or 6 years old. And I remember I'm still a little old enough. I had a box TV. I had a TV where I could only change the channels on the TV. And I would watch SportsCenter every morning before school, and just watching Stuart Scott and all those guys every morning just made me want to work in sports and do something with sports. I didn't know what at that time, obviously, but I thought my aspirations were to be on camera, as we can get into later, end up moving more behind the scenes. But that was where it all started. I was a little kid just watching SportsCenter, and now I get to work on it every day.
It's amazing to think that you went from there wanting to work at a specific place, and here you are working there now. And we'll get into the details of what you do and how you do it and the success you've had so far there later on in this conversation. What was it that drew you to sports and that type of a competitive atmosphere of, players trying to win championships and just showcasing their athletic skills?
My older brother played sports. He was a baseball player mostly, and my dad grew up playing every sport. So it was kind of just one of those things that my dad just introduced to me at a young age, and I just fell in love with. And I'm glad he did, because I don't really have any other enjoyments besides sports. For most of us, I feel it's that way. We do have other enjoyments, but sports is the main one. And so it just ended up happening that he put me in sports, and I fell in love with everything about sports: football, basketball, baseball, soccer. They threw me in all of them, and I always had a great time in all of them, even if I didn't play all throughout my life.
I remember a specific time when you went with me. We went to Camping World Stadium in Orlando for the state football championships, and you came to help out, and you hung out in the truck there with my crew. And I remember the guy that was our producer coming back to me. He's like, "Hey, who's this Clay guy? He knows so much about sports. We're having all these conversations about what Bryce Harper was like when he was in high school in Nevada and all kinds of stuff like that." You were one of those sports encyclopedia type of people. Really, it sounds like from a young age. So what did you do to learn so much growing up where you had that kind of knowledge by the time you came to us?
Watching SportsCenter in the bottom line was something I always did, especially, and then in car rides to school, I would memorize all the stats and read them off to my dad. I would never write them down. I would never do anything like that. I would just make sure I memorized the stats, and then we would just have the discussions in the car rides to school, and then it just snowballed into reading books about this team and this player, and to research projects about. Anytime I could do a research project about sports, I would. I actually got told, I think it was 4th grade, we had to do a project about a person, and they told me, they're like, "Clay, you cannot do somebody about sports, because everything you have done is about sports. We want to see if you can do something besides sports." So I chose Bob Marley. And that was a fun one to do.
Sports and music, good combination.
They go right hand in hand in a lot of even the pop culture of today. They're integrated into each other. Damian Lillard just wrote a song while waiting on a plane the other week.
And that's a big part about what you do at ESPN, is you mold the sports with music and culture and really things that connect with people going through that time. And look, passion is something you can't teach, Clay, and you've had that passion from the beginning. And sometimes we have to talk to our students now that, yeah, they like it, but they're not all in. They don't want to read the box scores. They don't want to go into that depth. So for you now being at ESPN, what can you share with people that are in the shoes you used to be in at Full Sail in terms of how important it is to know all those things?
It is so important. I thought I knew a lot of sports, and then I got there and like I'll have conversations with people. I had a conversation with one of the higher ups at the other day. He comes up to me and my buddy and he's like, "Hey, pull up the 2004 March Madness bracket." He's a big UConn fan. They won the title that year. He went through with us. All we did was give him the matchups, and he picked every correct winner from 2004. And this was last month.
Wow.
So
I
I was
want to
like,
say
okay.
that wasn't that the year that Khalid El Amin and maybe Emeka Okafor, they upset Duke, that Duke team that was loaded with Elton Brand? Was that year?
I think it was that UMass year. I want to say it was. I think Oklahoma State was in the Final Four that year too. It was a really weird, like compared to how today's brackets are, it's completely offsetting. But once I started hearing that, and once like I would have conversations with people and they're like, "Oh, remember this at bat?" Like remembering specific at bats. For me, it's different because I was just seeing stats and box scores. I wasn't being in Vegas where I grew up. I didn't have access to all the Yes networks, the Nessons. I got national TV games. That was it. I got to watch Lakers and Clippers games and Dodgers games, but those weren't really my teams, so I didn't really pay attention to them as much. So I was consuming everything via highlights and box scores, and there was no YouTube at around that time, so I didn't really get to watch full highlights of games until a little bit later in my life. So that's my bread and butter. That's where I love to make a living, is just looking at a box score, seeing how a player did, how can I translate this into worthy video and worthy writing to make it look good. And I have to do that sometimes at work as well when we have to back cut games and do something like that. You got to look at a box score and just know, all right, this is how you have to do it.
We're talking to Clay Schrager, a content associate at ESPN. And as he just told you, grew up in Las Vegas. Things have changed a lot over time there, Clay. Now you got a couple of professional sports teams, maybe more on the way. But for you as a kid, what was the sports experience like in Las Vegas?
It was different. I mainly went to AAA baseball games. The Las Vegas, they're now the Aviators. They were the 51s when I was growing up. And that was really the only sports team in the city when I was growing up. There was no WNBA team yet. There was no NHL team. There was no Raiders. None of that was there. So only time we really had a big event was the '07 All-Star game for the NBA when they came and played at the Thomas and Mack. And we had an arena football team, but we saw what happened with the arena. Arena football is coming back, but we saw what happened with the first time with that league. So really didn't have much sports within the city. It was mostly just playing. And that's where I think that helped me out a lot, because not only can I look at the game from a point of view of content, I can see it from an analyst. I'll look at games a little bit differently at times. I won't always watch the ball when I'm watching a game, because I know there's other stuff going on, and how can I use that to enhance other things with my job?
Great way to look at things. The one thing with sports that's always been present in Vegas for just about since its inception is the gambling side of things. And now that's become more mainstream. How did that influence your sports perception when you knew, wow, this is the one place or one of two places in the country where people are actually like wagering on games?
I didn't really understand that until I left, because you just grew up around it. It was so accessible. I remember being 7, 8, 9 years old. There's a bagel deli right next to the sports book at one of the hotels near my house. And every Sunday or every Saturday before the games, my dad and I, we'd go down there. I'd wait in line to get the bagels. He'd grab 2 slips. We'd each fill out one. I'm over 21 now, we can say this. We'd each fill out one. And that was kind of where I got my start of learning the sports betting part of it, and seeing how favorites work and seeing what teams are good and what teams aren't as good, not just looking at a score line and a box score and being like, oh, this team beat this team. Like, it could be a huge upset, and I didn't even know it at the time until I started seeing those, and that helped me out a lot.
I remember when you graduated, you said something to the effect of, "Hey, I was a kid who had to face some adversity growing up, and I had a few obstacles I had to overcome to get here. And look at me now, here I am. They said I couldn't do it. Here I am." What type of adversity did you have to face?
There was a lot of medical issues with myself when I was born and growing up. I had failure to thrive. Doctors didn't expect me to ever not be under the presence of parents. Honestly, they were like, this might be a child that will live at home his entire life and you guys will have to care for." That was something that was in the back of my parents' head that they had to deal with as I was a toddler. And luckily I was able to advance enough and medically advanced, and I was able to do everything. But that was just some of the stuff. I've gone through a bunch of other things along with that, but that was the main one where they didn't know what I was. No one knew who I was going to be, how I was going to be. I had a feeding tube until I was 7 years old. I didn't really start eating until then. So a lot of there's been a lot of adversity, but I always look at it as just seeing if I can push through it. And I know I can push through it. I've been through, anytime I go through a down day or like something bad goes on in my day, I've dealt with so much worse. I've seen so much worse. I've lived so much worse that I have to just remind myself that each and every day to keep going, to keep pushing through everyday life.
You've pushed through a lot and you've made it very far, and you are really successful right now working at the place to be for sports. Having that fighter's mentality, how has that helped you on this journey?
I'll say that helped me because it allowed me to never give up. I, I'm sure we can find the clip. Uh, my first ever day in class, it was Schetzel intro to sportscasting, and Gus was in there, and we were we were doing fake highlights, just doing practices. I think it was the Sean Manaea no hitter against the Red Sox. What, that would have been 2017 now? Is it that long ago? Jeez. I don't like this getting old stuff. And I didn't know how to say Andrew Benintendi's name at the time because I wasn't really a big baseball fan. My baseball fandom kind of went out the window once I hit about 14. That's when NBA took over. I didn't know how to say his name. I tripped over it 3 times and I go, F, right next to Gus with a camera on me with a mic. So I didn't think it could get much worse than that. And you just push through it, and mistakes are going to happen, and you learn that. And we all mess up. But a mistake is good sometimes because it means you tried something. It means you went outside the box. And I didn't really understand the full grasp of that until I got to ESPN because, yeah, when we're doing the stuff that we do at school with the where we have the studio and we have everything like that, now that it's making TV, no one's really seeing that besides us and us breaking it down. When you're doing stuff for millions and millions of viewers every day and you try something and it hits or it doesn't hit, that's when you're like, okay, move on. Can't think about it again. I know not to do that. I know to do that. And you just keep pushing.
Yeah, you told me a few minutes ago off the air before we started that you didn't know if college was something that was going to be in your future. When did it start to click that, hey, maybe this is something that I want to do, go to college and get a degree in the sports world?
I honestly didn't know that until I moved to Florida. So when I was 18, before I had graduated, my last few months in high school were really up in the air. My English class, I'll admit I was slacking going to. I was working 2 jobs and I was putting money over school. I was like, I'm making a good amount of money to where I feel comfortable and I'm possibly have a career here because I didn't know what I was doing. I had not applied to a college 2 months before graduating. I didn't know what all that was. And then my dad tells me, hey, we're moving after you graduate. It's up to you if you want to come with or not. I knew I couldn't live on my own with the jobs that I had, so I kicked myself into another gear to make sure I graduated. I passed my English final on the final day of the year, and that was how I got my high school degree. So sometimes things work out in your favor. And then we moved down to Florida, and my uncle, who's in the music industry, goes, "Hey, go check out Full Sail. I've had some buddies who graduated from there. I feel like you may be able to find a spot there. They have something sports over there." I went into the sports management degree, and then I met, I want to say his name is Eric.
Eric Saperstein?
Eric Saperstein, yes. He spoke to one of our classes. He said he worked at ESPN. I walk up to him. I go, "How do I get my foot in the door to ESPN?" I'm like, "What do you need me to do? I want to be behind. I just want to be at ESPN." And he tells me, "Wait a few months and I'll get back to you." And I'm like, okay, like I'm early in my college career. I not really business professional, so I don't really know what that means. And where I come from, that just means, hey, I don't have anything from you for you, go to the wayside in a
Yeah,
nice
Clay,
way.
I've heard that a lot from ball players when I ask them to interview. Yeah, I'll come and talk to you later, and then you don't see them, right?
Yeah. So he says that, and I'm like, all right, cool. Don't even think anything of it. Then about 3-4 months later, they say, "Hey, they're opening up a new program at Full Sail. Do you guys want to go to the announcement of it?" I tell them I'm going. It was I was like, I knew what it was. I knew it was the sportscasting degree, and I was like, I think this is where my future is. I'm gonna go. And then we took a class vote, and we all went. And since that day, I knew where I wanted to be, and I immediately left that. I left that announcement, went to my counselor, said, "Switch me to this program," and I started.
So you were actually at the announcement when they announced that they were creating the program.
Yes.
What was
I
that
think I
day
asked a
like?
question. I don't remember the question I asked. That day it was pretty cool because I didn't know at the time, like it was Gus was speaking about it, and they had the really cool rollout of it. They had Dan speaking about it and some other people, and it was just like, wow, we're getting Dan Patrick to put his name on this and to put a school out for young broadcasters, and I just happened to be at the school. Like this small trade school in Florida, I'm here, and what my dream has been, and one of the people that I used to watch on TV is doing it, getting my foot in the door, and I just tried my hardest the second I did.
I can hear the passion in your voice from way back then coming out now. I can feel how you felt when they made that announcement. And how long had you been in sports management?
Maybe 6 months, maybe. I think I was I think it was project and portfolio 2 or 3 was the last class that I took for that. I think the announcement was 4 months in, and 6 months in, and then took a couple of months before the classes had started.
So now you're in the Dan Patrick School of Sportscasting. It's never existed before. You're in the early classes, one of the first students to actually be part of the program. How was the early experience for you?
I really enjoyed it because I liked the transparency that we had about, hey, this is new, we're learning this. And for myself, I like to be able to put it in input, because not only am I looking at it from a eyes of I need to learn, I'm looking at it from an eyes of developing myself and everybody who has come after me and before me, of how we can develop this program and make it the best that it can be. And so I really enjoyed that part of the process, where it was, this is what we learned today in class. At the end of the class, hey, what can we do better? Because that's how it is at work. That's how it is every night. At the end of the night, we'll do a highlight, we'll do our entire day, and then we sit down with the person who works with us and we go, okay, what do you think went well? What do you think didn't go well? And review the entire night. So along with that, it prepared me for work. It prepared you for real life, just as we talk about all the time. Like it literally is what I do every day now.
Wow, incredible. And I know that it has been said that when you finish Intro to Sportscasting, which was your first class, that you essentially have the skill set that you're already through one class prepared to go to ESPN and start as a production assistant. Is that in fact how it was for you?
A lot that you learn in intro is basics of what we do in every day, learning how to look at a rundown and how to see how a rundown is being organized, how things are being put together, something we look at every day. VOs, how they should be flowed, how your shot should be. Obviously, there's intricacies for each company that they like, but the basics was taught there. SOTs taught, like everything that I was touching my first 2 weeks of basic training, I'd already been working on at school and been doing for the past 12 months. So for me, it was okay, there's your VO, here's your video, here's these things, because it was just second nature to me at that point with all the work that we were doing. It wasn't like this is a struggle and a new concept to me.
That's Clay Schrager. He's a member of the first graduating class of the Dan Patrick School of Sportscasting. Clay, I remember I got hired while you were in Intro to Sportscasting. I went in one day to see, I think it was one of your last classes. I was in there with your instructor, Jeff Schetzel, and your classmates. I remember Brian Montoya and Reese Shoney and Jake Wronghole. And I can't remember who else was in the class, but it was a good group to start. Maybe Tyler Baronsky, I
Yeah.
think, was in the class. And it was fun to see you all in action. What was it like to go from, sports management, which is an outstanding program and is about sports to some degree, but now you're in with all these people who just want to talk about sports all day. What's it like to be with a like-minded group of classmates who all have similar interests?
It was interesting because, and for me growing up, I didn't really know there was opportunities for children to have the sports broadcasting reps, to shadow people within that call games, to go to camps of how to learn all that. I didn't know those were accessible and available until I was older. So some of the other kids who were in my groups had done all of those things. They had to step up on me in terms of the on-air side. So it was really interesting for me. I not only was I learning from you guys of the ins and outs of the business, I was learning from them of how to be on camera a little bit. I was taking things from people when I still had that aspiration of how do you really talk to a camera? How do you make it feel conversational without it being with not having another person there on the other side of the camera? And so learning those things from them really opened my eyes. And obviously I went the route of not being on camera. I just didn't I felt I didn't have it. I didn't really enjoy the on camera part as much as I enjoyed the behind the scenes stuff. Yes, if I were to get some kind of on camera, if I was offered a play by play job, would I possibly take it? Maybe. I don't know. It would be considered, but I love doing the behind the scenes stuff. I love making the content, making the videos, because that's the cool part. That's the stuff that people are seeing. It's called the bar test, as we know, which is, can you understand what's going on the TV if there's no sound? And that's my favorite thing in the world. Every time I do work, I think, is this going to be able to be translated to somebody and understand what's going on if they're sitting at a bar? Because I know how much of our audience is sitting at a bar most of the time when they're watching the content.
Really good point. Yeah, it's supposed to be a conversation, the whole deal. So I think sometimes people get so caught up in, I've got to write this, and then you make it feel like it's like I don't say a term paper, but it's very official and all that. You need to make it feel like you're just having a conversation. And you got a lot of reps, Clay, both in front of and behind the camera. How did both of them, both when you were on air and all the stuff you learned ahead of time that's more similar to what you do now, how did that prepare you for life at ESPN?
It gave me such a foot up, because I can now look at it from both perspectives, of the perspective of the producer and PA, AP of building the video, but I also know what's going on behind the scenes for the talent, of how they're preparing, how they're writing, how they're doing all of their stuff. So it allows me to kind of balance things and know, hey, if he does this, like, hey, I'm going to give you a heads up. I'm putting this in here. Talent should say to this around here. I'm able to say times and say, hey, this is going to be your shot. This is what your video is going to be. Or I wait until something is written and I can cut the video to how it's wrote and I know how this anchor flows. I know how their timing is, and I can, because I've done so many reps of talking in front of the camera myself, you figure it out. And then that also prepared me immensely for prompting. When I was learning how to prompt, when I was doing prompting, I can adjust the wheel and I can scroll at any speed because I know how fast they're talking. I can hear the tempo in their voice and scroll to the correct manner and not go too fast or too slow and keep up with them while they're pausing. When they need to be more dramatic and more and put more emphasis on something, I know that's when I need to go slow, not just keep the same speed.
I saw your confidence grow a lot every month, and I was with you just about the whole way.
Yeah.
What was it about our program that made you feel more confident as you put in more and more work?
Reps. That is it, is just reps. And I felt confident. I felt my confidence growing throughout my time there, not only just the everyday work that we're doing, but just of my own personal abilities. And then once I got to ESPN, again, reps, reps, reps. Like, we say it and it gets blown out into our ear, and I'm sure at some point it goes in one ear out the other. Like most things that get repeated to you do, we all have had that happen. But I didn't realize how important it was until I got to ESPN. When you're like, I was talking to somebody about this the other day. I miss the feeling of the anxiety and the panic and the adrenaline rush when a highlight's about to hit and I'm doing a quick turn highlight. I don't feel it anymore. I've done it so many times that it's just like, all right, let's do it. Let's go. And I thought about it in that relation to play-by-play guys, circling back there. Sure, the Joe Bucks and the Al Michaels of the world, they've all done this so many times. When they're calling the Super Bowl, they're not getting nervous. Like, yeah, you'll probably get a little nerve. You get anxious. You get an adrenaline rush because it's the Super Bowl. It's the big game, whatever. But they know what they're doing. They've been there. They've done it. Like, you may have not seen some of them before, but they've called a football game. They know what they're doing. And so I put it in relation to that, and I really saw, like, okay, you want to know what? You can stay calm in these situations, and you can really do a lot of things. And it actually makes the content better because you're not panicking, which makes everything else go smoother.
You had an opportunity, I don't know, midway through the program, wherever. You weren't originally in the first group that was going to graduate, but because of your credits and everything, you and Tyler Bronski had a chance to kind of jump forward. And bam, now you're on track to be part of the first ever graduating class at the Dan Patrick School of Sportscasting. What did it mean to you to be part of that group that was really setting history?
It meant a lot because I knew that there was going to be even more pressure on my shoulders leaving and getting a job and doing well at the job, because I knew that we were going to be the face of the school for a little while. We are going to be the people that people are going to look to, that, okay, that's what they're putting out at the Dan Patrick School. That's the type of people. And now we have, as you spoke, Brian Montoya and a few others. JD has come to ESPN and I work with them. And JD I work with on a nightly basis. Him and I see each other every day. And it's really cool to see that stuff. And it makes me even prouder as the first class to see these people come after me and still be able to do the same job as me and be like, I know what, it's really, really cool that some of the sacrifices that we made in terms of being the guinea pigs with projects and being the guinea pigs with classes allow these kids to come in here and be just as successful and even more successful at times at these big companies, at the Foxes, at the ESPNs, even at local news stations. We have Chris, Tyler, and Jake, all of them local news right now. And it's just awesome to see. And I carry a lot of weight on it. It's first class. You're the first to do something like it. I don't know how else you can say it.
There was a lot of talent in that group too. How did they all motivate you to bring out the best in yourself toward the end of the program?
I think we all did it for each other. I think we all pushed each other in different ways. We all had different perspectives. Adrian would look at it from one way. Taylor had all his experience with his parents as well and all his knowledge, and he would look at it from a different perspective. I would look at it from a different perspective. So that was the thing that I really liked, is all of us would have the conversations that we would have when we would do those class projects. and how we would all see it from different points of view. I remember one of the classes we had with you, we had to make a highlight from the first game of the season, the Cavs Celtics game, when Gordon Hayward had the ankle injury.
Yeah.
And there's a discussion of, do you put the injury in the highlight? And I said yes. Other people said no. I get to ESPN and Dak's ankle happens. We show it. And immediately my brain went back to that. I wasn't cutting that highlight, but I remember that class and I was like, I wonder if we're going to show it. Do you blur it? Do you do this? And then my thought process started going through that. But I immediately remembered that day in class where we were discussing all of it and like why you do put it in there, why you don't.
And what he's describing was Gordon Hayward. He was signed as a free agent with the Boston Celtics years ago. And it was it his first game? I think it was one of his first games.
It was literally the first game of the contract.
And he had a gruesome injury. And so we had an activity which was like, all right, you gotta cut something from this and tell the story. And part of the whole purpose of it was to see what their decision was. Are they going to include that or not? And what video are you going to include? And a lot of students include that. And then we said, well, I probably wouldn't do that. I mean, that's what I said. That's what Mike Stinton said. It depends. But basically what we wanted to also impart was that's not always necessarily your decision. If you have a manager above you, ask them what do you want to do? What do you think about this? Because not only does that, then you get their added input, but it also protects you. If you make the wrong decision per se, and viewers don't like it, then well, I checked with them. I asked them. That wasn't my decision. So sometimes it's good to do that.
And that's what happens usually is if an injury with like that will occur, we'll have the discussion immediately with the people that we work, the highlight producers that we work with. Immediately, hey, how are we approaching this? How do you think we should approach this? I think we should do it this way. The other person will say I think we should do it this way. And then it's really nice because it's more of a collaboration of why don't we do this and this rather than just somebody saying, no, you're doing this, because that sometimes will take the feeling away from it's your highlight, not as much a group highlight, which you take ownership. You're the only person watching this game from full that's cutting the highlight. You're probably the only person in the entire building doing this. So you know everything, just like the super fan knows everything with it. So it's a cool perspective. And then you have to think of it from that perspective. You have to think of it from the super fan's perspective to the casual viewer who's just throwing on SportsCenter after their 9-to-5 job and they took care of the kids and they're winding down at 10 o'clock at night and they're consuming all their sports. How do you want to portray the game to them? And those are all thought processes that you have throughout the week, not only obviously with injury, but just overall when you're cutting something.
Like many of the other people who've been on this show, Clay participated in a number of extracurriculars in addition to his classwork, but he also was one of the first to work a lot of hours at a job, and his specialty was shoes. He worked for Adidas. Clay, where did your love of sneakers come into play in your life?
I was sometime in high school. My friends were like, you need to get a pair of Jordans. And I was like, I've never really been big into shoes. I didn't really have much growing up. And when you're a kid not having much, you don't really get the nicest shoes because you grow out of the shoes so quick that it's not worth it. So once I got to high school and a little bit later, obviously the growing of my feet had stopped. So they were like, hey, you should get this. And once I got my first pair, it was over. And then I got a job, and it just snowballed into, I want every pair I can get. I want this pair. I want that pair. I've slowed down a little, but I'm still sitting around 50 pairs, somewhere around
50
there.
pairs? And that's just how many you have now, or is that like the course of your life, how many you have?
Over the course of my life, I've probably had close to 100 that I've like gotten and sold and then flipped and kept and not kept, like somewhere around there.
And we talk to you, and we still say this every day, every class. Our goal is for you all to be memorable, especially when you're trying to put together a demo reel. And you had, I think, one of our first segments was called Clay's Kicks, and you would show off a pair of sneakers that were often worn by athletes. what went into Clay's Kicks?
Now it is time for the thing everyone has been waiting for. Clay's Kicks is back.
You guys told me make up a creative segment, and everyone else was doing something on a player feature, and I wasn't really big into features. And everyone was doing it around athletes in some kind of story, and I was like, I want to take a different approach, my own approach that I always do, and something that I'm very passionate about, and that's always been shoes. And so on my social media feeds, I always get, oh, this guy's wearing this tonight, this guy's wearing this tonight, oh, here's this guy's new shoe, PE, here's this guy's specialty shoe tonight. And so I was like, why don't I just talk about like some of the best ones, do like a top shoes of the week, and became Clay's Kicks. And I would just go scouring social media and the internet for all of the best shoes and cleats and everything from that week that I liked. And obviously it's opinionated, but that's the fun of it, is I like the opinionated things. And that's something that I've learned now that I can translate at ESPN, which is when you do top plays of the night, not everyone's going to agree with your order. Not everyone, some people are going to say this should be here, this should be here, this should be here. Like that happens every night that we have top plays. So every day of the week, there's these conversations, but it made me realize early I have to have confidence in myself of, I think it's this is where I'm putting it. And that's helped me grow a lot, because at the beginning I would be like, oh, do you guys think it should go this, or this? I would ask my friends. I'd ask my coworkers, I'd be like, what do you think about this? And they would give me an order. And then one time I was like, oh, I'm just going to choose this. And ever since that day, I've been just having the confidence to go and just know that my decision is my decision. I live with the results.
So you graduate with your kicks, with your degree, with all that confidence, and now you're the first group that's out into the workforce. And we thought you'd all do well, but we didn't really know until you started. But it didn't take too.
I knew.
Yeah, it didn't take too long though, and you end up at ESPN. What I want to know is, what was the interview process like? You know, take us from graduation to going through the interviews to finally landing that job.
So graduated, I can't remember the exact date, but I remember it was October 2019. I graduated. A person from ESPN who still works there, and I just saw him the other day for the first time in a while. He was coming to speak to everyone the next day, and I was like, okay, I graduated, and the next day I get to go back to campus even after I graduate, because I need to have this meeting. I need to go to this meeting because it's ESPN. And I go to scan my badge to get into the door, and I'm already denied. I mean, it's not even 24 hours after I've graduated and gotten a degree, and my badge already doesn't work. And luckily, who else but Kevin is sitting there waiting for everyone to come in at ESPN. So he opens the door for me. Him and I get to talk, and he realizes who I am because Gus had put my name into a hat. And I was able to see a little bit. We were able to talk a little bit about the interview process then. And so the first part of the interview process, Kevin actually called me, is just a phone call sports knowledge. And he called me. I had worked the night before, as we talked about. And so I think I got out of work at 2:00 in the morning, somewhere around there, normal time for what my hours are now. And he calls me at 10 a.m., wakes me up with a phone call. And so I literally wake up, and he goes, hey, it's Kevin from ESPN, and immediately flips a switch in my head. I'm like, okay, I'm awake. I'm not half asleep anymore. I'm awake. And we start going through everything, and we talk just like whatever was going on at that time. I think one of the questions he asked me was, who's going to win tonight? I think it was the Cardinals and Braves in the wild card. I want to say it was those two teams. And I was like, oh, Braves are going to smash them. And then the Cardinals won that game like 13-1 or whatever it was when they scored like 8 runs in the first inning. And I was like, oh, I look like an idiot, but whatever. Like, it's a prediction. Can't really change that. And so that was the first one. Second one was a Zoom interview. And it was, I'm going to give you.
Who was that with? Kevin again?
No, that was with Jeff. Jeff, who still works, who I just met with. He's part of the next program. Both of them are. And all it was obviously interview questions. And then the activity was, you're cutting a highlight. You get X number of plays. They didn't give me time, which was nice because obviously I can't see time without a timeline. They're like X number of plays. What are the plays that you're picking? He shows me the plays I have to pick from. I write them down and then I put them in the order that I say. And it was, I want to say it was a Thursday night football game, Texans Dolphins, when D-Hop made that ridiculous catch against his leg that was called offensive pass interference. Even though it wasn't, it was still like number one. Everyone had, it was viral everywhere. And it was actually interesting because I said I wouldn't show that play if it was a one play highlight. I wouldn't show that play because the play technically didn't count. And they countered with me was, well, was it the best video of the day? And I go, okay, yeah, it was. And so like even me agreeing and me understanding, I think helped out with the process because I was able to be like, oh, he has the ability to adapt and to change direction if somebody says something and they're with more experience who is suggesting something, they're not just going to battle it out. Now, will I battle a little bit more at this point in my career? Yeah, because I've learned enough and had enough reps, but at that time I didn't. So he was like, this is what you should do. And I was like, okay. And then end up working out. I was supposed to see him for the whole interview and I wasn't able to see Jeff for the entire interview. So it was funny when I went in for the third interview, they flew us up here, put us in a hotel, and you do a first meeting is a group meeting and you're with a couple of people from Next and the other people that you're interviewing with. First thing I said to Jeff is, oh, great to finally put a face to a name. And so like, again, just being personal, trying to be remembered as somebody was something that I was trying to do going into that interview. And then that interview is they show you a highlight and they're like, how would you cut this highlight again? And now you're doing it in a group setting. So now not only are you hearing what other people are saying, you're hearing all the different minds of how they would tell this story. And I want to say that one was, that one was the Amir Garrett, the Reds Pirates fight before Yasiel Puig got traded back when he was still in the MLB. And yeah. And so it was like, all right, how do you tell this story? And people were like, both these teams are out of a playoff race. And I had people saying like, hey, I'd show a first inning home run that makes the game 1-0. And I'm like, I don't care about a 1-0 home run in the first inning. I care about the fight and how we got to the fight. That is it. So that was what I had said. I was like, those were the plays that I chose on. And I guess they like the plays that I chose out because I'm sitting in the building making those decisions every day now.
Why do you think you stood out against the other people who were going for the position?
You guys preparing me for what to expect within the industry, I think was a big one. And I think the level of professionalism that I was prepared for between school and just personal life of how to be ready for an interview. There's 4 of us in the group interview. Only 2 of us made it. Both of us still at the company.
Nice. One
of the other people walked into the meeting, top button undone, tie dragged down for an interview at the biggest company in the sports world. And then I don't remember. And then the other person just didn't make an impact. That they weren't really memorable. And so like knowing that part of it, I knew I had to do something. And then you do one-on-one interviews as well throughout that day. And I basically told them, this is where I want to be. This is what I want to do, but I'm willing to do anything that you guys need me to do to be able to do to get to that point. And so I just tried to make myself as useful, as much of a Swiss Army knife as I could. And that's what I always try to do every day.
Sounds like a good strategy. You know, it's all about what you do for them. They don't care about how it helps you, right? It's about how you help them.
Yeah, how you help the company, how you make more money for it, how you make them, how you line their pockets, helps line your pockets.
That's absolutely correct. So you got it. You got the job. And now you've been working there 3 years. What's it like to be living the dream now?
It's still surreal. You still have those moments throughout your time there where you're like, I just did that. Yeah, that just happened. I just did that. I remember my first one was the first time I ever cut a highlight. I don't know where that highlight is. I was supposed to shadow somebody. He was doing 2 events that night. He was finishing up his first event as the second event was starting. I asked him, I was like, I was like, do you want me to log it for you? I can get some reps logging. I can learn how to log on the logging system for ESPN. He goes, yeah, sure. As he's doing that, I just do it myself. I start cutting the highlight. I start cutting the stuff. It was a hockey highlight. Goals started happening. So some saves happened as well. So I was like, all right, let me just clip some stuff off for him. He can do the rest. Let me just help him out and put him in a better position. It's all about teamwork. And next thing I know, the person overseeing both of us that night goes, oh, you're cutting it? All right, you're finishing it. It's how he was. He was one of the best people that I had when he was with us. He's no longer with the company. He was awesome to work for. He always let you be you. He would let you fall on your face, but would be there to pick you up and make sure that everything was okay. Which I like, because I'd rather fail and learn than not fail at all and just cruise, because you're not gaining anything from that. And so that was really the first time I was like, okay, I'm here. First night doing a practice highlight and I'm making air. And then the next one was the first actual highlight I did. Nova Butler.
Game of the night, Hinkle Fieldhouse, Villanova, Butler, 2 top 20 teams.
20-minute delay, leaky roof.
This is the one that we use your shot sheet for, right? I think we still use that in class today, right?
Kamar Baldwin and then Gus Johnson shot full.
I might be, yeah. It was definitely. Yeah. I think it was either Villanova Butler or maybe Xavier was in there. It's one of. I know Villanova Butler sounds right.
I think it was Nova Butler, and then it was just a nuts game, and then there ended up being a step back 3 game winner by Kamar Baldwin, and I'll never forget that. And I just remember, I didn't know what this meant at the time, and now I do. All I remember hearing, I go, oh my gosh, top play, because you yell a top play happened. And then I hear from the person overseeing me yell to me, go, Gus Johnson's clear to use. I don't know what that means. I'm like, what do you mean he's clear to use? What are we doing here? Like, what do you mean? And then I understood it was shot full, use his call.
Step back for the win! Come on, Baldwin!
Literally, my first highlight was a bow shot bow and learning how to cut it, like how to do a bow shot bow and line it up in my first highlight. It was like, okay, you're here now. That was where I was like, all right, yeah, no messing around anymore.
Welcome to the big leagues.
Yeah.
So you do a lot with shot sheets, and we talk to our students about how to create a good shot sheets all the time, but I don't think anything could be better than hearing from someone who actually works at ESPN about it. So what is your strategy for creating a good shot sheet?
Keep it as simple as possible. Wales explained to me, the anchors are paid to be creative and to be themselves. Just give them what they need to know. And that's it. Last night, Shaden Sharp poster Draymond Green. Absolutely like full reach back dunk. All I put, early fourth quarter, Blazers down 8. Blank passes it to Shaden Sharp, who dunks on Draymond Green. Replay, what a poster by Sharp. That's it. I'm not saying anything else. I'm not saying Sharp with the big post. I'm not putting words in their mouth, because I don't want them to read something that might not sound authentic as them. So all I'm giving them is the facts of the play and what the video is and I let it go and I let them be them, because that's the only way you can do it. Now, do you have to adjust shot sheets at times depending on talent? Yes. Yeah, that is something you have to learn within. Here, some anchors will read word for word what's on the shot sheet. Some anchors only need the names and they'll figure out the rest themselves. They'll do storytelling. And so you just have to know that and figure it out. And that's why I kind of just do the keep it simple for everyone, is because then it's not having to adjust to you're not always having to write completely different shot sheets every time.
And you mentioned storytelling. How does storytelling go into how you create the shot sheets with the beginning and the extra info and also the way it's edited?
It's the entire process. Storytelling, like you guys always hammered storytelling into my head when I was there, and I was like, okay, yeah, it's storytelling. It didn't really click for me at that time. Then I got here and really saw how it is storytelling every highlight, how every video is a piece of storytelling, how it actually is. It clicked for me. I just needed to see it in the business. That's like,
So what clicked? What was it that clicked that got you where you are now?
I think it was the first time I watched a full highlight with graphics, with everything, with no sound, was where I was like, okay, yeah, that's where the storytelling part of it comes into play. And after that, once it clicked, it clicked. And storytelling is just every part of it. Last night, I did a Blazers Warriors highlight. The start of it was Chiclet off the top, Damian Lillard coming up. They had done other elements of Dame's 71-point performance. And then I started it with a graphic that said Dame averaging NBA best 40 points per game in February. One, that's an absurd stat. Two, it's good context to the rest of what is being told beforehand. And then I immediately went into Dame mini melt stuff of he had a big first quarter, and then I told the rest of the game. So at the end of the night, when I'm discussing it, when I'm going over the end of the night discussion, we're able to say, okay, we're able to tell multiple stories within this one highlight, which is Dame has been hot, ridiculously hot, and he kept that up in the first quarter. He didn't do anything the rest of the game, but he kept it up in the first quarter, so we know he still has it in him. The Warriors made a 23-point comeback in the third quarter, from that near the end of the second quarter to the end of the third quarter. How did that happen? And then how the game ended. And so you're really telling three little stories within one, I think it was a 120 highlight. You're telling three different stories in that time. And so that's when it really all clicked for me in terms of storytelling was, oh, highlights are just sectioned off stories. That's all it is. You're just telling each part of the game in different stories. And then after that, that's how I learned storytelling. And that was how it clicked for me. I understood it. It just clicked that way.
Right. Well, your first year is kind of a prove it period, right? So you made it through and you're still there 3 years later. What is the first year at ESPN like trying to prove yourself?
So Carson Farrell as well was part of that with me. And we had one of the most interesting first years at the company because we start January 2020. My first day before I start my SportsCenter training, Kobe passes away. So the first night that I'm going into meetings is not, oh, this is how it goes. It's, guys, we did a great job yesterday with their coverage of Kobe, people sharing stories of people texting them, of thanking them for what we did, like that much of an impact of it had on people's lives, not only because of obviously the impact Kobe and the iconic figure he is, but how we covered it and how we did everything around it. That was eye-opening. And then we go along for a couple of months and I get my first highlight. I go through my first couple of things and then boom, I'm in a meeting. I get a phone call from my scheduler that says, hey, you're working from home today. We'll let you know when to come back. And for the foreseeable future, we'll let you know when to come back to campus. I'm like, huh? I look behind us to the TV, sports stopped, COVID. And I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know how I was going to keep my job. I didn't know if they were going to keep me. I didn't know what was going to happen. So then the next few months was us logging melts from home. That was the only thing we could do. And then they started a program that was like just talking with the highlight producer. You got assigned a highlight producer and you guys would talk through stuff, like just making sure, keeping yourself on top of things, like keeping focus with your career. And during that time, I kind of took advantage and I told him, I was like, hey, I really want to be in sports and I really want to cut highlights. What can I do to keep doing that besides just logging melts? And he goes, all right, every 2 to 3 days, he'd assign me a game, a random game, an older game. I'd watch it, I'd log it, And then I would write down the plays that I thought would be sufficient for the highlight. And then he was the actual highlight producer of those games. So he knew how that highlight was already cut. And then he would show me how the highlight was cut and how it was different. And so I would get to see my perspective and how somebody else sees it. And that's when I learned you can give 10 different people the same game and you will get 10 different highlights. Not one of them is right. Not one of them is wrong. They're just all 10 different highlights. And that's when my confidence in terms of cutting went up even higher, because I'm like, okay, even if I try something, it's not that it's a bad thing that somebody else didn't think of it. Just no one else thought of it. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, there's a lot of subjectiveness when it comes to sports and sportscasting. And it's interesting to hear you tell those stories. I'm curious, what is a typical day like for you now in your job?
Walk in, get settled, get logged in on our computers, check rundowns, just do quick glances at things. And then we have a meeting where everyone, including producers, will come in. We all sit down, we throw out ideas. If you have anything, ideas for your highlight, if you're working on highlights, if you have ideas just for the show, for an outside element, anything like that. And we do all that. And then by that time, it's getting closer to 6 o'clock. We'll have dinner, and then 7 o'clock games are starting. And you're hitting your stride at that point, whether it's a highlight, working on shows, whatever it may be. And it's just going. And you start cutting your BOs, you start listening to sound, you start watching the games, you start helping cut things, you start working on your wraps, you start working, and then your night just goes. And then next thing you know, you look up, it's 12 o'clock and your show's over and you're like, oh, where'd today go?
Awesome. Well, it sounds like you're having a good time and you're certainly doing great work, and it's been awesome. And just to hear your drive, and I feel like that passion's as strong as ever. So ESPN's lucky to have you and have that kind of passion. We're up toward the end here. What I like to do is end with something we call the dream sequence. So I've got 3 questions with you, rapid fire answer, and I want to get what you got. All right. So first of all, dream highlight to create a long version of, and that could be something that's happened recently or could happen in the future, or even like a past game that might be memorable for you.
That already happened for me. It was I ended up doing 2 highlights in one night. I helped out with the second one, and the second one was Steph Curry's career high.
Oh, wow.
I got that thrown to me at halftime when he already had 31. He ended up finishing with 62 that night. I got it when he was at 31 points at halftime, and I just had to go. And I was just about a year in. So like I had confidence I could do it, but it was really only like 5 months of highlight cutting at that point because of COVID. So it was just, all right, go. And that was one of my favorite highlights. It's still one of my favorite highlights that I've ever done. A bucket list one that I checked off because I got to do my favorite player's career high.
I'm guessing a hero highlight. Did you throw anything special in there?
Yeah, I did a counter of how many points he was at throughout the time. Oh, if I would do it today, it would be completely a different highlight. And I think about it every day, but I look at it and I'm like, I'm able to see my growth. And that's really cool because even with probably my most prideful highlight, even though it's nothing fancy, it tells the story very well. And I chose all the best shots and I told the best story.
All right. I know there's a lot of celebrities going around the ESPN campus. Dream random encounter there with someone that you just bump into.
Already bumped into A-Rod, bumped into Carlos Boozer. I really don't. That one's hard. Because we do see a lot of people. I've had meetings with Chris Berman. Like you see it, you just walking the halls, you just see people and you don't even realize it because we're all just trying to get our job done. Oh, that one. Ooh. I really don't know that one.
Okay. Well, it sounds like you already had some, so that's a pretty cool thing.
You meet some people, but like, again, it's Wilbon.
Oh, okay. Awesome.
Yeah, he doesn't really come to Bristol much, but that would
I
be
used to
somebody I would love
spend,
to.
yeah, I used to spend time with him when I was in college because I was at Maryland and he actually came on our pregame show and stuff. So yeah, he's a nice guy. You'll enjoy meeting him whenever you do. All right, last one. They're not Jordans, but they are Clays, not Clay Thompson's, Clay Schrager's. What's the Clay sneaker shoe design look like?
I'm not really big into designing shoes, but you can't go wrong with just the Jordan 11 silhouette. Like just I would put whatever.
Just with
colors.
a picture of Clay instead of Jordan on there, right?
Yeah, we'll just put like a little logo of me at a desk working on a highlight instead of Jordan dunking. That's what the difference is, and then make it my colorway.
Love it. All right. Final advice. What advice you have for all those both coming through the program and graduates, maybe those who want to work at ESPN one day?
Don't be afraid to fail and never get down on yourself if you don't have direction. It'll figure itself out. As you heard, I didn't know what I was doing. Worked out. You just keep going, you keep pushing, you'll figure it out. Things will fall into your lap that you don't expect at one point, and next thing you know, you're on your way to Bristol, Connecticut, moving by yourself for your first time and living in an apartment with a person you know, and that's the only person you know for the next 1,000+ miles around you. Things will work out. That's it. Like that. It's kind of my life story.
Yeah, and it's a good story. And it's been a pleasure recapping it with you over the last hour. Keep fighting, everybody. It's not always easy, but it's good things pay off to good people and people who are willing to put in the work, which let me say it again. That's someone who really does that, Clay Schrager, and I appreciate all his time. Clay, thanks for joining us today. It's been a lot of fun on this edition of the Livin The Dream podcast. We'll have another one for you soon. We have one a month. For the rest of you, just keep on living the dream.